So this is this Moghe Solez paradox that we've been talking about for some time. And I've recently, from attending the USCAP meeting, gotten a bit more confident about this idea. So I thought it'd be good for us to talk about it a bit. Okay, so when I was at the USCAP, I went to the exhibit area, and there's something fascinating about exhibits. If you compare the TERMIS meeting, where they are sort of not yet in a clinical phase where a lot of money is being made, so there are not any booths with big build-ups and impressive structures. But the actual booth cost is exactly the same. I was fascinated by that a 10 by 10 booth costs $3,500 US for both entities, for the USCAP. But of course you don't see anything that where that's the amount that's spent, because at the USCAP they're much bigger than that and so on. So the influence on the attendee of visiting the exhibit area, you sort of get the impression that the companies that have the greatest real estate, the highest exhibits, these like houses, multi-story structures and stuff like that, and large amount of actual space there are probably more important than the companies that just have the 10 by 10 booths and stuff. So I think that influences people in a completely different way from the consideration of whether there are corporations that are influencing research results in studies. That would be really bad, and there's a lot of literature about whether or not that's happening and so on. But there's a whole other thing that I think you and I have actually identified, and that is that a probably subtle influence. I don't know that it needs to be direct. Like, take the company, whatever it is, that has the grandest booth presence at the USCAP. I would imagine they're giving the USCAP a substantial amount of money. And so early on, the USCAP comes to them with a draft program. This is what we're planning to do this year. And the people from the company say, well, that looks pretty good. And I don't know that it's more detailed than that, but probably the USCAP drafts a program that to some extent they know the heavy hitter supporters will like, right? Because they're not going to put a lot of lame things there that they know that their financial supporters won't like. So there may not be any direct interaction where, for instance, the people who are doing bulk transcriptomics are saying, well, we don't want any single cell transcriptomics in the meeting because we don't do that. So this human cell atlas thing, we don't really want that. There may not have been a single conversation like that, but it's just that by catering to in a general way to the wishes of the main financial supporters of the meeting, you end up with pretty much mainstream subjects. In other words, things that are already being done in a big way. And that is the reason, I think, why this paradox that you and I have identified comes about. That the summit papers, like the Global Kidney Disease Summit paper in 2017 that came out in the Lancet and Kidney International, simultaneous publication, a whole bunch of papers. It was a kind of multifaceted thing. And not a single one of them mentioned the Human Cell Atlas project or regenerative medicine, tissue engineering, all the things that you and I talk about a lot as part of the medical future were actually specifically excluded, it seems. But I don't know that they went in and removed things. I think some of it may have been a kind of natural, just the way, it's kind of a self-organizing thing, you know, like you have something. That global summit had corporate support. Practically every paper has, you know, an acknowledgement of what the potential conflicts of interest of the authors are and what, you know, financial support. So that, you know, disclaimer is there. And I think it's kind of the same as the meeting program, that the reason that you end up with sort of emerging things that are the most exciting part of the future of medicine not being in summit papers and not being in meeting programs is because it just is not part of the structured process of planning those things. You know, you plan a meeting so your supporters will kick in the amount of money or more that they usually do, and then you plan a summit that the financial supporters will it will seem futuristic to them, even though it's not, because it is the future of what they're currently doing.
Yeah.
Like gross, bulk transcriptomics, getting a kind of average reading of RNA transcripts in a big piece of tissue, like let's say you do a kidney biopsy and there are numerous pieces of that. You don't know that they're all kidney. You just know it came from a kidney biopsy procedure. Some of it could be fat, fibrous tissue, muscle. And so you analyze a piece of the biopsy without really any way to independently verify exactly what it is. That's so different from the single cell atlas approach where you know so much about each individual cell and you know lineage, state, all these sorts of things. That really, if you think about it, there's kind of no going back. Right, that once you taste the excitement of the human cell atlas approach, why would you ever go back to this kind of blind analysis, getting average transcript readings from bulk tissue? It just wouldn't ever make sense. So it is the same kind of threat to existing companies that I guess regenerative medicine is. If you're a company that is making an immunosuppressive drug used to treat rejection, the idea of a future where rejection won't be the big challenge, where there'll probably be lots of other challenges, the things we've talked about, getting the right cells in the right places. But I don't think it's surprising that there would be some resistance. It may be subtle, it may not. But when someone considers in a meeting program putting regenerative medicine in, putting tissue engineering in, putting in ex vivo perfusion, the idea of taking an organ that's damaged and actually fixing the damage before you put it into somebody else. Those things all have to do with a future that sort of runs counter to the future of the people making the anti-rejection drugs now. So I think this paradox is real. It's to some extent new in that I believe that in previous eras where communication wasn't as easy as it is now, we didn't have as many channels to communicate, that actually from every high-profile meeting program, you would learn new things from just looking at the program, and it would tell you what are the new things that you have to learn about, right? And that's just, the paradox is that that's not happening now. You could go to the USCAP and learn nothing about single-cell transcriptomics and this human cell atlas. You to some extent it's similar to the American Transplant Congress and so on. So I think it's just necessary for people to be aware of this, and there are more sources now. I mean, there's social media. There are all sorts of other ways. It's no longer the case that if you want to say, how do you learn about the new things going on in medicine, that there are only 2 or 3 sources. That did used to be the case, but now there are like thousands, potentially of different ways, different, there are physician-specific social media groups. There is, like the American Society of Nephrology has nephrology communities, I think individual online forums having to do with different subsets. I've just decided to rejoin the ASN so I can try those out. So anyway, that's kind of my thought about this, and I felt shy about it before. We created this paradox, we named it, then for a long time I was sort of not talking about it very much. And the reason is that I wasn't sure. I thought there's still the opportunity. I made these claims of these high-profile things, leaving out the most important technologies for the future in October 2017. So it's now the end of March 2018. So there have been many months during which somebody could have contacted me and say, hey, Dr. Solez, you're completely wrong about this. It's really not the case at all. I was a part of the preparation of that meeting or that summit paper, and I can tell you that there were other reasons why we chose the subjects that we did, so nobody. Absolutely nobody has contacted me to indicate that this is not a real phenomenon, that it's not really happening, that I have misinterpreted it. And like we reached a lot of people. The supplementary material on my latest AJT personal viewpoint paper contains this, and I thought that the editor might want it altered in some way, but it wasn't altered. So in a sense, we've reached people with this idea of these major subjects that will define what the future of medicine is, being left out of summit papers and meetings. We've done that through traditional journal publication, through email discussion groups, through more modern social media vehicles, and the only response has been people praising us for the stand that we've taken here, and no one has given a counter argument. So that's what makes me confident about this. So how are you currently feeling about it?
I think it makes it even stranger that lots of people seem to agree and seem to kind of understand where we're coming from, that a lot of kind of the futuristic tendencies and things that we're talking about aren't being mentioned in more mainstream outlets. So I think that just makes it even more confusing that most people tend to agree, but it's still not being shown
Right.
in the way that everyone agrees.
But don't you think that I want to say it's kind of a conspiracy of silence, but people know that other people are not arguing with me, they are not coming back and saying, no, you've got it all wrong. So they don't want to be like the only one, like the only author of a Summit paper to finally speak out and say, no, Kim, you really got it all wrong, or the only personally responsible for a meeting program that completely leaves out these futuristic subjects. So I think as time goes on, the danger to personal reputation of people who have been part of these things finally say, well, I read what you wrote, 6-7 months ago, and finally I've gathered the strength to argue with you about it. So no, I think that's really what it is. Everybody feels, well, this is just how it's done. This is how we organize meetings. It's how we organize Summit papers. And, I'm not personally responsible for the way it was done. I was a part of it, but I'm not responsible for the whole aggregate thing, and therefore I don't see any reason to say anything about it. That you're right about what the outcome was. So that's kind of the feeling that I have. It's not that they're shy in general. It's just in this instance they think it's not in my interest to talk about this. So yeah. Anyway, so I think the people out there just need to keep their minds open and to realize that meeting programs and Summit papers no longer contain all the subjects that people should be thinking about when they think about the future of medicine. So anyway, that's our story. Thank you for listening.